السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والمبعوث رحمة للعالمين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. The title of this session, to know him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to love him. And I looked at that title, I said, isn't it to know him is to love him? Could anyone, I challenge anyone, Muslim or non-Muslim, in fact, human or non-human, to know him, truly know him, and not love him? I challenge. Because even the tree that served as the member of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he finally was made a member, when he was made a pulpit, and he abandoned standing and holding the tree as his member, as his pulpit, even the tree ached, missing him. Even the tree ached, missing him. So to know him is to love him. There is no other option, not only for humans, but also for things. So the challenge and the question becomes, do you know him? Because if you do, I have no doubt you're going to love him. And our challenge as Muslims is to know him. And it's critical why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us to know him. And that's why, as Shaykh Kifah mentioned, it is part of the completion of our iman. In fact, it is part of iman, because he said in a certain direct way, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من ماله وولده والناس أجمعين. When Umar radiallahu anhu, and I love Umar as well, as a truthful man who didn't know anything but the truth, he spoke it even on his own life. He said, Ya Rasulullah, uhibbuka, I love you more than anything else, my money, my children, even my parents, illa nafsi, but myself. The Prophet ﷺ did not accept it from him. Did not accept it from him until Umar said, O Prophet of Allah, uhibbuka, I love you even more than myself. And he said to him, Al-ana ya Umar. There's a reason for that. And it's not a selfish reason. It's not an ego. There's a reason for that. You know, when you look at all religions that are around, most notably Christianity, we live in a land where the majority of the people are Christians. They love Jesus. In some cases, they love him more than anything else as well. There's an issue, though, with that love, is that he was elevated so much so, beyond getting to know him and beyond emulation. So when he does something, they say that's Jesus, he can do it. When he forgives, that's him, he can do it. He's beyond human. You do that and you are basically giving people a license to never live up to their potential, never be the ethical being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted them to be, never to apply what's right and what's wrong, even when they are capable of violating it with no consequences. The only time that will happen is for them to have an example, a living model that emulates that models that, performs that in front of them, and then they are capable of emulating that model. And the Prophet ﷺ is that. Is the example. He is a human. He suffered from every human limitation that every human suffers from. He got sick. He was a child. He grew up. He got married. He got tired. He worked like everybody else for everything he accomplished. When he fell short in effort, and I don't know if even I can say that, in results perhaps, Because in effort, Allah knows that he never fell short of effort. When he had to deal with the consequences of that in his life. And so we as Muslims can emulate him, can try to live up to what he put in front of us. And that's where the injunction that Sheikh Kifah as well mentioned. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. He's an actual model, example to follow, to emulate. And for me, as I told you, growing up, as I got to know my Prophet ﷺ, I could not but love him. I could not but love him. And the most important thing to me is that, and what I have noticed as I've gone through life, is that at every stage of my life, there was something in his life that resonated with me, that I can identify with. I remember reading the stories about his mother dying when he was a few years old, being taken by his grandfather, then uncle. Reading the stories about how much he cared for his uncle, how much gratitude he felt for his uncle taking care of him, that when he became a man and got married, he took in his cousin Ali radiallahu anh, because he wanted to do something to pay back for all the beautiful things that his uncle did for him. I became a teenager and I started reading about how he, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, dealt with teenagers. I was absolutely mesmerized. I would look and say, who among our leaders, our sheikhs, who can even come close to the way he dealt with the young people? Starting with the hijrah. You know, in the hijrah, it is one of the most seminal events in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. It is where Quraysh, all 40 tribes of them, planned together to kill him. Who did he entrust with sleeping in his bed that day? A teenager, Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. Who did he trust with bringing him the food while he is plotting his way into Ghar Hira and then eventually into Medina? Asma bint Abu Bakr, a young girl, teenager. Who did he trust to bring the sheep and go after him so those who can follow Al-Athar, they cannot find him? A teenager. He entrusted them with his own life. Who did he send to Medina to bring the advent of Islam to Medina, to teach its people? Mus'ab ibn Umair, a teenager. Who did he choose as a place for his companions at a time where he had less than 40 of them and he was afraid that they would be finished off and killed? It was Darul Arqam ibn Abil Arqam. Al-Arqam ibn Abil Arqam was a teenager. And then I saw firsthand the young man coming to him and saying, Ya Rasulullah, idhan li bil-zina. I can imagine many of our mashayikh, what their reaction to that would have been. What was his reaction to him? He brought him closer. Said to him, Atardahu li ummik? Would you accept that for your mother? No, no, O Prophet of Allah. Atardahu li ukhtik? Would you accept it for your own sister? No, O Prophet of Allah. أترضاه لعمتك؟ No, Prophet, كذلك الناس لا يرضونه لأمهاتهم وبناتهم. So are people. He made him feel and identify with how everybody else would feel if someone came and transgressed on their most sacred in their lives and their families, and that's their sisters and their mothers and then he prayed for him. Then he put his hand on his chest and prayed for him. And the young man says, after that, nothing. I didn't detest anything more than that action. Think about that. Think about the young man in the battle of Badr that came to him and said, Oh, Prophet of Allah, I want to fight with you. He said, you are too young. He said, but you accepted so-and-so. And he is younger than I can defeat him. I can wrestle him. And the Prophet ﷺ, what was his reaction? Did he say, how dare you, I'm the leader of the army? How dare you question me? Did he tell him, we are on to a battle and you are coming to disrupt all of this? Who are you? Did he tell him, how can you question my judgment and I am the Prophet of Allah? No. He actually said, who is it? And the kid named another child who the Prophet ﷺ or another young man, they were not children, young men, 14, 15, perhaps 16. And with time and generations, it is quite different from our days today. He brought him out and he said, wrestle in front of me. And when he was able to wrestle the other young man to the ground, he said, okay, and he took him. That's how he dealt with young people. So as a young man, I felt this is the one man in history that I've never met in my life that understands me, understands who I am, what I'm going through, my struggles. So I loved him as a young man. Then I got married, and I saw how he dealt with his wives, particularly Khadija, then Aisha radiallahu anhuma. The way he was, the gentle soul that he was, raising Aisha, keeping faithful to the memory of Khadija. Then I saw how he dealt with his children. The hadith says that whenever Fatima radiallahu anha walked into the room, he stood up. His face beamed. He kissed her on the forehead. He treated his children like the jewels that they are. ما ضرب امرأة ولا طفلا قط, never laid a hand on them. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And so I loved him as a father. When I became a father, then I became a teacher and a principal of a school with few hundred children in front of me, their parents. And I remember telling many people, I have never understood the ayah in the Quran, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ, until I was in that position. And so as I knew him, I loved him. And particularly, I mean, the miracle of the Prophet ﷺ is that his personality is boundless. And he was just about everything to everyone. And to me, you want to talk miracles, I don't look in the Quran for i'jaz al-Quran al-ilmi and all. I don't. I look for the life of the Prophet ﷺ because it is a miracle. I have not seen anyone before or after live up to that. And he is truly an example in every single area of his life. I've not spoken about Muhammad the politician, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I've not spoken about Muhammad the statesman, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I did not talk about Muhammad the military leader, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I did not talk about Muhammad the genius economist, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I did not talk about the most phenomenal strategist you can think of, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he is all that. And you can teach and learn about him in every one of these areas. When I want to look about the truthfulness of his message, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I don't try to go look for what people usually look for. I look for, could a person be all of that and be lying? Be anything but a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And my answer is absolutely not. But what sticks with me with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what sticks with me are three characteristics of his humbleness. With everything I told you, I swear, if someone had 10% of the things I just mentioned, and I mentioned perhaps less than 0.001% of his personality and his greatness, some people have little of even that fraction, and the ego they develop is absolutely incredible. And the attitude they develop is absolutely unbearable. Yet you have this man, the world is at his fingers. Anyone can reach him. People come up to him and they insult him even after he has power. You know, the Bedouin comes and yanks him from his collar and says, Ya Bani Abdul Muttalib, innakum qawmun mutul. He pulls the collar of the Prophet and tells him, you, the children of Abdul Muttalib, Banu Hashim, you are people who don't pay your obligations on time. The Sahaba wants to kill the man. He looks around. He smiles at the man. Then he tells Umar, who was the one who got most angry, Ya Umar, ta'muruhu, ta'muruni bihusni al-qada. Look at that. He didn't say ta'muruhu bihusni al-taqadi. He said, ta'muruni bihusni al-qada wa ta'muruhu bihusni al-taqadi. You needed to ask me to pay on time my loan. You need to ask him to know how to ask for his loan. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Tawadu'. And then the second one, forgiveness. His capacity to forgive is incredible. When I sometimes get mad even at my own children or my own co-workers, and I think about the Prophet ﷺ, his capacity to forgive in everything. People hurt him in his life, in his honor, in his dignity, in his capacity, in every way. He managed to forgive each and every one of them. And the last one is his kindness. And there are only few. I can teach not a course, not few courses. I can teach for the rest of my life about what I learned about the Prophet ﷺ. And I cannot claim that I know him the way I need to know him. But I do know that I know him enough to love him. And I ask you to do the same. If you do not, and that's my challenge to you, and that's what I will leave you with. If you do not, when you sit with yourself, if you do not feel that you love the Prophet ﷺ, you have some learning to do. Go learn about him. And once you do, you will have no other course but to follow him. But to want to be among those who drink out of his hand on the day of judgment, inshallah. A drink that you will never be thirsty after. That you will be under his flag, as Sheikh Kifah mentioned, part of his ummah, whom he will not want his feet to be removed on the day of judgment until they are entered into heaven and forgiving. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we will be among those who love him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and love him because they know him, and those who will meet him on the day of judgment and be part of his ummah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.